What is it about your director's vision that makes it so unique, particularly with this project?
What is it about his vision? It's such an. It's so singular. He has such an encyclopedic knowledge of the context of the film and the history that it came out of, but also managed to sort of wrench it into the now. And the way the film is in conversation with the sort of history of cinema and the films that came before, but is also creating something incredibly new, I think is really singular to Damien and his vision for this. When we... Go ahead.
When we met Damien, it was before he'd written Whiplash, and the movie that you're going to see is exactly the movie he described to us over coffee. And exactly as Jordan said, what was striking is he's a student of cinema and musical specifically in a way that I've never encountered before. However, it was never about paying homage in a way that was backward-looking, but what would Gene Kelly do today? Yeah. How do we pay respect to that genre and then update it and make it utterly romantic and spectacular and yet totally contemporary and nuanced and real, and feel transition between the fantasies and the reality of real relationships seamlessly. And if we could do that, it would be something that would push the genre forward. And that ambition is something that is incredibly rare in a young filmmaker, and we're just delighted that people are responding well to it.
You've got two very rare talents, very precious talents in your leads. Can you talk a little bit about the prep work that Ryan and Emma did? Because I think particularly with Ryan learning the piano is it's a breathtaking achievement.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of rare and precious talents, because the one precondition that they had when they signed on to the film was we will not do it with less than 3 months rehearsal, because they are so devoted and so committed when they take on a project. So they were in our production office every day doing piano and vocals and Pilates and dance, and Ryan would do it 6 days a week, even at his house. He was so committed. We didn't have a piano double on the film. We had no sort of safety net. And the first or second day of shooting was his sort of extraordinary piano moment. But every note of piano that you see played in the film is him. There's never a cut. That's why we sort of make sure you start on his face and get to his hands to prove that authenticity.
In prep, we talked a lot about like his piano stuff being almost set pieces in the same way that the musical numbers would be set pieces, and they're filmed in the same way. And they're sort of these just like beautiful one takes that you can actually see his performance, and as you said, like all of the work that he put into getting it there.
Yeah. When I think of it, it's the biggest gift this movie's ever had, and you can't have an epic love story without two people who communicate that sort of chemistry, romance, and level of frisson. What they brought to the film is literally indescribable. They really crafted those characters alongside Damien, and it is, if you have an emotional reaction to the film, it's because of what Ryan and Emma bring to it alongside Damien's filmmaking. We are indebted to them being in the film. The most fun we had during production was giving ourselves challenges and making it as hard on ourselves as possible. So we made sure we couldn't shoot at night unless it was magic hour. We did a lot of long single takes. We shot on 35mm film, and that sort of ambition and the audacity of the sort of challenge we put on ourselves created an athleticism that brought the best out of our crew. And the biggest surprise was actually the musical numbers, and the things that were hardest were the most fun and kind of were executed at the highest levels, and that was most gratifying.
Opening scene on the freeway.
That was a tough sequence. I mean, we started prepping that really immediately when we went into prep, so there were many, many, many weeks leading up to that, and then it turned out to be like one of the hottest weekends on record. We shot it on a Saturday and a Sunday, and it was just it was brutally hot, and there were cars and people everywhere, and a closed freeway, and but it was a lot of planning, but a lot of really good planning. So
I will say it was the 2 best days of shooting I've ever had in my life, and I wouldn't give it up for the world. Yeah. It was phenomenal. I think there's a hunger for something original, and I think we always felt that if we pulled it off correctly, and if Damien articulated the vision that he first mentioned to us many years ago, that people would respond to something completely new and emotional and bold and audacious. And I think he delivered on his promise, and hopefully people are responding well for that reason.
Yeah, it's also a really joyful film. It's sort of like a euphoric cinematic experience, and I think it's a little bit of almost escapism. And I think people want to go to the movies and have a good time.
Well, that was the hope, really. I mean, I grew up loving those old Hollywood musicals and the Jacques Demy musicals of the 60s, and what I wanted to do was try to take that kind of form of filmmaking that we think of as old-fashioned, but try to see if it could exist today and see if it could be updated and revived and kind of twisted into something new. I love movies that do that, that take old genres and kind of make them feel brand new. That was always the aim for me.
I mean, you're always working with fantastic talents in front of the camera. I think with Ryan and Emma, though, there's a sense that you really did have a precious gift as a director. Can you talk a little bit about the commitments they made and what they both brought to their role?
Yeah, they made my job a lot easier as a director because, you know, you're on set, they bring a certain kind of magic already, just individually and especially as a pair. But in addition to that, they are incredibly hard workers. So they rehearsed and trained for 3-4 months before shooting. Ryan learned how to play piano for the part because he plays a sort of virtuoso jazz pianist, and it's always him on screen. There was no piano double, so that's just an example of like the kind of commitment they gave to the project. So as a director, for me, it's just it's a dream come true. I think in broad terms, I've loved the idea of putting music on screen as a musician myself, so that was definitely something that animated both Whiplash and this. And also, I think personally, just the idea of, you know, stories about artists trying to express themselves, the sacrifices, the balance between life and art, between dreams and reality. Like that's just again, very personal ground for me to cover, so it's easy to write about.
How challenging was it to shoot that scene on the freeway?
It was that was probably up there with the most challenging things I've done. But I mean, in times like that, you're just lucky that you have a great crew, I mean, we had hundreds of dancers. They shut down an Easy Pass ramp, so we had about 2 days to shoot it, and kind of all these little things seemed to go wrong as we were shooting it. Clouds came to cover the sun, the truck door wouldn't open, things like that. But everything kind of came together at the end because, again, we had a great crew, so it was fun. Well, it was shot over 2 days. I think the result is about 3 takes sort of stitched together. So it was, but it was fun. It was a challenge, though.